What if Hollywood's greatest love stories weren't really love stories at all? Behind the sparkle of studio premieres and fairy tale weddings lived a world of careful deals, closed-door ultimatums, and unions built to protect careers, not hearts. Tonight we're opening the doors on 22 famous old Hollywood marriages and the hidden bargains that kept them standing. Some were tender partnerships with honest rules. Others were ice-cold contracts. And a few hid secrets so volatile they could have ended careers overnight. Stay to the end, because the last two will change how you watch classic movies forever. 1. Judy Garland and Mark Herron. A wedding at the breaking point. By the mid-1962, Judy Garland was fighting exhaustion, ruthless studio pressure, and a lifetime of dependency that had begun when she was a child star. Enter actor Mark Herron. They married in Las Vegas in 1965 and separated within months. Biographers have long written that Herron had been in a serious relationship with actor Henry Brandon and returned to that relationship after the divorce. For Judy, who craved stability after years of being controlled by studios, the marriage felt like a last bet on normalcy that simply couldn't hold. She kept working, kept singing, kept trying to keep her life upright even as the ground moved beneath her. But Hollywood's quick fixes didn't end there. 2. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates. The heartthrob with a clock ticking. In 1955, America's leading man was under the microscope. Reports swirled, reputations were at stake, and his agent pushed for a solution. Marry Phyllis Gates, his secretary. The wedding happened fast. It calmed headlines for a time, but whispers never fully stopped. Decades later, Hudson's public battle with illness turned him into an unlikely educator, one of the first major stars to put a human face on a crisis most people were too afraid to talk about. Whether or not Gates knew the whole truth during the marriage remains debated. What's not debated? The studio system made privacy a luxury even the biggest star couldn't afford. And yet, some actors refused any marriage at all, with devastating consequences. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor, a 13-year icebox. Two of MGM's biggest names. A picture-perfect couple on paper, behind closed doors, cold air. Accounts from the era describe a union encouraged by the studio to quash rumors that threatened both stars' marketability. On their wedding day in 1939, Taylor reportedly skipped the customary kiss. That tone, formal and distant, lingered for years. They adopted a son, kept the mansion spotless, and hosted the right people. But intimacy? Rare. When the marriage ended in 1952, it felt less like a breakup and more like a contract expiring. The studio's strategy had worked, but it came at a price no publicity team ever paid. 4. Cary Grant and Diane Cannon. A perfect picture with missing pieces. Born Archie Leach, Cary Grant carried childhood scars. His mother disappeared when he was 9, committed to an institution without his knowledge. As an adult, he turned to then-legal psychotherapy with LSD to untangle the damage. Decades later, he married Diane Cannon. They had a daughter and an immaculate public image. Meanwhile, rumors persisted about Grant's long companionship with actor Randolph Scott. Memoirs and biographies have repeated those stories for years. Grant himself stayed silent. The marriage to Cannon lasted 3 years. The mystery lasted a lifetime. And sometimes the mystery started the very first night. All, Rudolph Valentino and Jean Acker, locked out on the wedding night. The first great screen idol married actress Jean Acker in 1919. Hours later, according to long-circulated accounts, he found himself locked out of their room. Their marriage quickly collapsed and was annulled. The humiliation followed him as his fame soared. Valentino would try again, hoping the second time would be different. It wasn't. Rudolph Valentino and Natasha Rambova. Love, power, friction. In 1923, Valentino married Natasha Rambova, a brilliant designer with formidable influence. She had vision. He had star power. Together, they had turbulence. Industry insiders blamed Rambova's control for clashes with studios. Others say Valentino trusted her eye more than any executive. Their marriage ended 2 years later. Valentino died at 31, mourned by thousands in the streets, his private life still a riddle. A riddle that other stars solved, with carefully worded vows. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas. A marriage built on truth, just not the usual kind. Composer Cole Porter married society tastemaker Linda Lee Thomas in 1919. The arrangement? Clear-eyed companionship. She understood him. He adored her grace. It worked beautifully for decades. Then a 1937 riding accident shattered his legs. After dozens of surgeries and, eventually, an amputation, Porter withdrew, and the song slowed. People listened to the wit and sparkle, not knowing how many lyrics carried hidden longing. Their marriage wasn't a cover so much as a pact, mutual protection in a world with very narrow rules. Not every pact stayed gentle. Tallulah Bankhead and John Emery. The wildfire tamed on paper. Born into power, star on stage, scandal magnet in life, Tallulah Bankhead did not behave for anyone. She'd loved women since school days, drank too much, and said whatever she pleased. The 1937 marriage to actor John Emery seemed to tidy the edges for a while. Friends said the union felt like a velvet rope rather than a lock. It separated her public from her private, but it never really contained her. Sometimes the rope is all the studios wanted. Liza Minnelli and Peter Allen, history repeating. Daughter of Judy Garland, Liza carried both a crown and a weight. In 1967, she married singer-songwriter Peter Allen. Rumors about his relationships with men followed them the entire time. After their divorce, Allen later came out publicly. Liza kept performing, kept reinventing. The parallels to her mother's life were striking. Glory, pressure, and a marriage that made more sense to the outside world than to the inside. But some couples never married and still rewrote the rulebook. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, a partnership that played by its own rules. They never Wednesday, they didn't live together. Yet for 26 years, Hepburn and Tracy were Hollywood's most convincing couple. Biographers have long discussed Hepburn's close relationships with women and Tracy's struggles with faith, drink, and desire, and how their bond shielded them both from harsher scrutiny. What they had was not a publicity stunt. It was a mutual defense pact layered over genuine affection. Their on-screen chemistry? Real. Their off-screen arrangement? Quietly revolutionary. Some partnerships had formal vows, signed with fountain pens and studio ink. 11 Janet Gaynor and Adrian, 20 years of protection. America's sweetheart, Janet Gaynor, married celebrated MGM costumer Adrian in 1939. For 2 decades, they enjoyed a genteel, artistic life. Fans saw a fairy tale. Insiders saw a smart solution. Both faced relentless speculation. Together, they found privacy. When Adrian died in 1959, the marriage ended not in scandal, but in silence and respect, proof that a lavender arrangement could still be kind. Others were improvisations made under pressure. Van Johnson and Eve Abbott, the wedding that shocked even insiders. Here's a studio legend. On the day Eve Abbott Wynn divorced actor Keenan Wynn, she married Van Johnson, Keenan's best friend. The timing turned heads across town. Rumors swirled that the studio orchestrated the switch to protect Johnson's image and box office heat. The couple had a daughter, stayed married for years, and guarded their privacy fiercely. It's one of those tales where the timing says more than any press release ever did. Timing, in fact, is everything in Hollywood and in marriages. 13. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. Wit, work, and an understanding. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester were brainy, funny, and perfectly matched for conversation, if not convention. Rumors about his private life trailed him. Elsa, an independent force, kept her own lovers and her own career. Their marriage lasted decades because they defined it themselves: equal parts loyalty, discretion, and theatrical brilliance. Another duo built a whole theatrical empire on that same playbook: Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, the greatest stage couple who told us nothing. Broadway's golden pair lived, toured, and triumphed together for half a century. They guarded their personal life like a state secret. Gossip floated around them. They let it float away. What mattered was the work, their immaculate timing, their rare chemistry, their mutual devotion. If there were separate private worlds, no one ever proved it. Theirs may be the most successful "don't ask, don't tell" in showbiz history. But for some, even a gentle arrangement couldn't outrun the tabloids. Nils Astor and Vivian Duncan, 2 years, 1 message. Swedish heartthrob Nils Astor married Vivian Duncan in 1930. They had a child and divorced 2 years later. The union did little to halt the rumors or slow a career slide once sound arrived. In an industry where whispers could cost you roles, the marriage felt less like a shelter and more like a flare that revealed the storm. Meanwhile, some marriages were frank from day one and lasted because of it. Marlene Dietrich and Rudolf Sieber, freedom by design. Marlene Dietrich married Rudolf Sieber in 1923 and kept the marriage, if not cohabitation, until his death. She lived expansively, loved men and women, cultivated an entire sewing circle of powerful friends, and still entertained troops at war zones like a soldier with a spotlight. Sieber understood the arrangement and, by many accounts, made peace with it. Theirs was less a cage than a treaty. Treaties are tidy, battles are not. Tyrone Power and Annabella, the romantic hero with a crowded script. The dashing leading man wed French star Annabella in 1939. He also served as a Marine Corps transport pilot in World War II, flying dangerous missions in the Pacific. After the war, headlines about alleged affairs men and women became part of the gossip churn. The marriage ended in 1948. A decade later, Power collapsed mid-scene on a film set and died of a heart attack at 44. His screen image remains eternal, his private life forever debated. Not everyone chose debate. Some chose reinvention. Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine, the showman and the composer who saved the children. Danny Kaye married Sylvia Fine, a brilliant lyricist and composer who shaped his career. Rumors about Kaye's private life were part of studio chatter for years. What the public saw was a charming star who spent as much time doing good as doing gags. UNICEF's first Goodwill ambassador, flying everywhere to raise money for kids. The marriage endured because both loved the work and the world they could change together. And then there was the star, who refused to sign any studio script at all. William "Billy" Haynes and Jimmy Shields. The non-marriage that changed everything. MGM's top box office draw in 1930, Billy Haynes was given an ultimatum: enter a respectable marriage or lose his contract. He chose Jimmy Shields, the man he loved. Instead of a studio-arranged bride, Hollywood closed its doors. Haynes built another life as a legendary interior designer, inventing the Hollywood Regency look and ultimately earning more than he ever did on screen. He and Shields stayed together 47 years. Joan Crawford called them the happiest couple in Hollywood. Sometimes you win by walking away. Others kept walking right back into the fire. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli, a Technicolor romance with fine print. Judy and director Vincente Minnelli married in 1945 and welcomed Liza a year later. The films were dazzling, the house was famous, but the realities were complicated. Over the years, biographers have written that Judy understood more about Vincente than the public ever would, and the marriage, like many of its era, balanced affection with practicality. They divorced in 1951. The work they made together, though, still glows like a marquee. For some couples, the most shocking secret was how normal the deal actually was. 21. Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson, a late-century echo of an old pattern. It wasn't studio era anymore, but the pattern persisted. Anthony Perkins, brilliant, complex, and forever linked to psycho-married photographer Barry Berenson in 1973. Before then, he'd been linked quietly to men. The marriage gave him family, privacy, and a softer public frame. He died in 1992. A decade later, Barry perished on 9/11 aboard Flight 11. Their story reminds us these arrangements weren't only about hiding. Sometimes they were about finding a place to be human in an industry with sharp edges. And our final marriage? It's the one that proves how carefully the past was edited. 22. Barbara Stanwyck and Frank Fay, the rehearsal for a role she never wanted again. Before Robert Taylor, Stanwyck married Broadway star Frank Fay in 1928. Accounts from friends and historians describe a stormy home, heavy drinking, and public embarrassments that shadowed Barbara's early Hollywood climb. By the time they split in 1935, she'd learned exactly how much of herself she'd give to a union and how much she wouldn't. If the Taylor marriage later felt like a staged photo, this one felt like a rehearsal that taught her to control the script. Conclusion: these marriages, some tender, some tactical, some quietly radical, tell one story: survival. In a system that punished difference, people wrote contracts to protect their art, their income, and sometimes their sanity. A few found real companionship inside the deal. Others paid with loneliness behind exceptional smiles. The movies show us light on a screen. The unions behind them show us what it costs to keep that light burning. If you want more unfiltered old Hollywood deep dives, hit like, subscribe, and drop the couple you want us to investigate next. Which union here surprised you most, and why?